Welcome back, everyone, to another awesome episode of the BIF Bites podcast. I'm your host, Jerry Me, joined as always by my wonderful co-hosts. We have Mr. Brendan Flaherty. How you doing, Brendan?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good. Mr. Mike Long. How are you doing, Mike?
Hey, Jerry. I'm in between big deals.
Okay.
So listen.
So does that mean you're sitting between Jerry and I?
Yeah.
So if you ever ask me and I just say tween, that's what it means.
Tween. Oh, okay. All right. And last but not least, the slightly less corny but still lovable Adam Shear. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing great, and don't test me. Don't test me. My daughter's gonna test.
Don't test you? All right.
Yeah. I can get kind of corny.
Okay, breaking out the dad jokes.
That's right.
All right, we're gonna have an entire segment on dad jokes later.
I can definitely win that.
I mean, everyone knows the funniest type of person is the punniest type of person, right?
Funniest type of person.
Yeah.
I gotta write that down. That tip. That's a life tip right there.
Exactly. Well, speaking of kids, I think that's kind of a perfect segue into kind of the first thing we wanted to talk about, which is kind of adjusting to the new normal of, being financial professionals in this new work from home lifestyle. What do you guys think?
It's definitely been a change.
Definitely. So something we were talking about that we really wanted to kind of bring up on the show today is just that work-life balance of, being CFPs and adjusting to this new mindset, this new kind of common practice of doing these, virtual client meetings at home. And for a lot of us, that means, doing it at home while the kids are also at home. I know, Mike, your kids are, grown up and out of the house, but Brendan and Adam, both of you guys have kids at home.
Yep.
So I want to hear from you guys. What's it like having client meetings when, you got the little ones running around in the background?
Yeah, I could start here. One of the friends of the BIF guys, I was in a meeting with them recently. And, with this new norm, you get accustomed to your kids just wanting to poke their head in and put their face on the screen. And I don't know what plan they were crafting downstairs, but they both came in giggling. And I kept on with the meeting, as I always do, kept my cool. And before I knew it, I had a hanger around my neck, and they literally just pulled me out of the screen. So,
like talent show, like like the Little Bo Peep, like Shepherd's Crook pulling you off stage.
You got the hook. Just awful, yeah. So, what I learned from that was to keep the door closed and locked if I'm in a business meeting. But also that I think with this new norm, people are a lot more forgiving than they were. I mean, previously, if you worked remotely, you'd see in job descriptions, you have to have a dedicated space. It's got to be quiet. We don't want any sounds of dogs or children. You need to be able to be focused during the hours of 9 to 5, 9 to 6. And I think with everyone working remotely now, people are a little more understanding. So, if I get embarrassed in the process, it's fine. But my kids are around. My kids are actually in virtual school right now. My wife and I opted to have them in school virtually. So they're home with the both of us. We're both working virtually. And I have a dog and I have a cat.
So you've chosen this. You've chosen this. This is your fault.
I have. Yeah, that was our choice, given the two options we had. And there's good and bad to it. Just like with parenting, we get to experience our kids learning by their side, during this time. And I know in the past, my wife had been going into the kindergarten class and volunteering just to get a sense of what was happening in class, how our daughter was doing. But we have, front seats for that. We've both flexed our schedules so that we have all school hours that they're engaged covered, and we somehow find a way to feed them and feed ourselves and get a little bit of sleep and to get our work done. So, but it's a lot, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners out there are experiencing similar challenges. Just the impossible task of trying to get everything done in a given day with everyone on board, everyone at home. So that's I could talk about this for a really long time if you guys want to.
Yeah. So what's interesting though is I get to turn the tables now because my daughter, not by our choice, the school system is all virtual right now. So she's 11. She's in 6th grade, and I can hear and feel the embarrassment, a wave of embarrassment like coming over her anytime I get near her when she's in school. and so this morning, like, so she's sitting there with a Chromebook, which is issued by the school, and she's got the camera pointed at her, but she sees me out of the corner of her eye, and she immediately turns the Chromebook to face the couch so that there's zero chance of me humiliating her. And it is a new school, so that'll be psychological warfare that I deploy for the rest of the year. I promise you that.
6th grade is the worst.
Yeah.
So Brendan, have you had any trouble with kind of client meetings or anything? It sounds like you're more of the terror for your daughter than your daughter being the terror for you.
Yeah, so when all of this first started occurring back in March, my office had a positive exposure. So one of the women in our office, her daughter tested positive for the coronavirus. So we got closed down for 2 weeks, and I want to say that was like the 3rd and 4th week of March. Which coincided perfectly with the absolute bottom of the market, and so I was doing a lot of client calls from home, and when you add the stress of the background noise of the kids fighting over the computer and the dogs barking, my home life should have been like a commercial for Jack Daniels, where you just there's an amazing amount of background noise, but
just a clip of Brendan's life, and it just says
as
the little like placard comes up and it says it drives you to drink.
Right.
One of those days.
As I'm trying to talk my clients like back into the building inside the other, the right side of the window, and it's just like everything's melting down. But to your point, I think that people have. They were very understanding, and they just, it certainly complicated the conversation just a little bit. But I think that I was much more concerned and sensitive about it than my clients were. And really since then I've been working mostly from the office, but certainly trying to take the opportunity to work from home a little bit because it was nice. The one silver lining, I guess, in all of this is that when everything was shut down, you just really got to spend really good quality time with no distractions, nowhere to be, nothing to do. And, that was a nice little break for, I think everyone's lives just get so chaotic now.
Yeah, I think it's a good point both you guys brought up is that, from the client's point of view, unless you just have just a really uptight client, and I think advisors know which of their clients are that one uptight client that they have.
Yep.
They're pretty forgiving because it does happen to the best of us. Like I think this was before quarantine, but I think it was like CNBC or something like that. They had an analyst on and he's like giving this presentation on live news, and then all of a sudden the door swings open and his like 3-year-old comes in and starts like dancing behind him.
Yeah. And then you see the wife like crawl on him. She does like an army crawl to get the kid out of the room.
Yeah,
like
but it's still all
no
on
man's
camera.
Land. Yeah.
Yeah. So if this is happening to like a financial analyst on like Closing Bell, being seen by millions of people, people are pretty understing.
Because we can all connect to that. Right, we've all been there.
Yeah.
And I think that now, Mike, have you? So in the amount of time that you've been working, is this the first time you've ever been forced to work from home, or have you worked from home before this?
Outside of unemployment?
Yeah.
Just kidding. Yeah, I guess so. But I was a real trendsetter, and I just didn't realize it. I'm in my 15th year of working from home.
Do you think that it's different right now? Does it feel different for you, or is this just kind of like the normal course of business?
It feels like the normal course of business.
Yeah.
What the only thing that's changed really is, like I used to head out immediately at 5:00 and hit golf balls or something, and
head out from the house.
Head out from the house.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been quarantined for almost 15 years. I did think it was weird though that my sons reversed the locks on the house so that you needed a key to get out from the inside. So I don't know if this is related.
Yeah.
I got used to working from home.
Yeah.
Mike, I think we're going to start having some wellness checks on you.
The other thing that's been bizarre is this is starting to, I think, alleviate just a little bit. But, so I work it's not a huge city, but it's definitely a city with all the complications of that. But driving into work in the morning, there's just no one out there. And so that's a little eerie. And I think I've gotten used to that a bit. But, that's also been a kind of a weird affectation of this.
True. Now, it seems like kind of a common theme is that we all kind of just are now looking for excuses to get out of the house.
Yeah.
When you work from home, it's almost like the place where you go to relax is now your workplace, and now the place where you relax isn't relaxing anymore.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of people are doing the quote unquote work from home, but still going somewhere else to do their work. Like I know, Adam, don't you do a lot of your work from like your backyard when the weather's nice?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I learned earlier on, because I was working remotely for 2 years prior, or 2.5 years prior to the pandemic. And one of the ways that I learned I work well was just changing scenery every few hours, getting up and going for a walk here and there. But yeah, you guys see me often on our video calls. I'm out in the backyard when the weather's nice. It adds just a little variety to it.
Now, does it feel different for you?
It does actually, because, well, I mean, by choice, my daughters one was in preschool, the other one was in elementary school. Yeah. So I knew that I had these longer stretches of fully dedicated work time, silence. I could just be focused for that stretch. And I think the pattern of my work now is much more in very smaller, more concentrated pockets of focused work. And then when they get to bed, I'll do some work. I'm an early riser, so I'll often wake up early and get some work done at the front of the day. And then it's just, checkered throughout the day. I have to be with them for a moment, back on the work for an hour. So it's a lot. It's a lot to juggle. So it definitely feels different.
Now, one thing a lot of advisors are doing, and it's kind of an allure of the work from home advisor, the virtual advisor, is, going to coffee shops, or, we've heard from a few advisors, they go to their local pub and they set up in the corner of their local pub and do, meetings all day. What about kind of like security issues? Because when we bring our work out into public, doesn't that kind of open us up to a whole new risk that I'm sure our firms probably aren't too happy about?
Well, I know I'm conservative enough that I would probably never have the guts to try that, regardless of the number of safeguards I had on my notebook. I'd probably still think, no, there's somebody that can tap in here while I'm sitting in the coffee shop. But I'm older and probably more conservative than most advisors. So, I don't know. How do you other guys feel about that?
Well, sitting in the pub all day doing your work, the promises and the guarantees by the end of the day probably get pretty robust, right? So,
of course I can double your portfolio by the end of the year.
It's a sure thing. It's a sure thing. But don't shh.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I don't think I could do it. I just think that, and I would, not so much because I think like, the boogeyman's out there trying to like capture what I'm doing, but it would just, if I just don't know how my clients would feel about it, and I
Sure.
think there's this expectation of security that I can't guarantee that I'm giving there. And, so I just would feel, it wouldn't feel comfortable for me that if my clients found out about it, I don't know if I'd have a good answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, from the client perspective, I don't know how I would feel if I'm just like bearing my entire financial life to someone and I just see like a bunch of hipsters walking around in the background
Right.
with lattes. I'm like, should I be telling you my social security number right now? Like it's
kind of circling you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's even before. So even before the the coronavirus. I mean, a pretty common thing to do is meet a client for a drink to just kind of discuss things, maybe go over things, but you try to find a place that's relatively quiet and so I think that's certainly fine, but to just sit there all day and work, I don't know. I just don't know if it would be the right environment for me.
When on those client meetings, Brendan, when they were in person, were you aware of just not getting into too much detail into their personal issues, financial issues?
No, I mean, I think that no, I mean, it would be a normal meeting. I think that, one of the benefits that you have of having that conversation in a restaurant or at a table in a bar, it's just a little less disarming or a little more disarming, I guess I should say, than coming into like a stuffy financial office. So I think it made people a little bit more comfortable. Some clients won't ever do it, right? But some clients are very comfortable with it, and it's just like the part of any other relationship where you kind of understand where those lines are with people. And but I've had some pretty significant and personal conversations with clients in at a table in a bar, not necessarily at the bar, but at a table off to the side for sure.
Sure. Now, and clients, I think, more and more are warming up to the fact that you're not face to face. You're maybe not at the coffee shop or the bar when you're dealing with them. But it seems to serve to relax a lot of people, too, that you're in your office, you're talking to them, they're in their home, and they just seem more relaxed quite often. Have you guys experienced that?
Yeah. And so what's interesting is that there's, again, I've been doing this for 17 years now. There's clients that I've had for, well over 10 years, 15 years that I've never met face to face. Everything that we've ever done has always been over the phone, but now they're asking for Zoom meetings. So it's like, well, for the last 12 years, you've never wanted to see my face. Why all of a sudden are we doing this now? And so well, Zoom's just become like this thing. It's become like, this is how we do business now. So people who literally never dealt with me in any capacity other than a phone call are now looking for WebExes and Zooms.
Kind of one thing we really wanted to focus on that we've talked about outside the podcast is just, really talking about how to be the best certified financial planner that you can be. Do you feel that virtual meetings are a tool that should be in every CFP's toolkit? Is this the future of financial planning? What do you guys think? I
do. And I'm, on the back quarter of my career of 40 years, but I love to think about how different things would have been had all this been available, 20, 30, 40 years ago when I first started, and how much more productive I could be by having virtual meetings when it really wasn't of any significance to be face to face. And so, yeah, I think it is the future.
And it's funny because the technology was there. Like, I remember they were talking about Skype when I was in high school, and we definitely had the ability to have this kind of lifestyle with clients well before COVID came along. It just seems like COVID was kind of the kick in the butt everyone needed to kind of adopt this kind of virtual meeting, culture.
Yeah. And I think what we're going to see is that just from people becoming more familiar with the technology and more comfortable using it day to day, I could see there just being an expectation that, why do I need to go, take a half-hour drive, sit in a little traffic? If we could do it virtually, I'm comfortable with that. I mean, I have a telehealth meeting with a specialist on Monday, and I never would have done that prior to the pandemic.
Yeah,
I would always think you got to go to the office.
Yep.
Yeah. I feel Brendan's going to play devil's advocate here. He looks like he has a contrary
No,
opinion.
I mean, I think
I like my bricks. I've got a 5,000-pound desk here, dude.
That's exactly. Well, there's a lot of 5,000-pound leases out there, I think, for a lot of these companies. But I think that there are definitely some clients who are very comfortable with those virtual meetings. But I do think that there's something to be said for being across the table from one another. And so I think that you're going to have, again, I'm going to have some clients that just just like anything else. They don't ever want to talk to me unless there's an issue. And then there's others that really want to be on the phone with me on a daily basis. And I think it's going to be the same thing with face-to-face versus virtual. And I think it's it probably is similar to the doctor, because I think most people, if given the choice between having to go into the doctor or see the doctor via their computer, I think most people would say it's a lot more comfortable and a lot less invasive to do it over the computer. And I think with financial advisors, I think it's similar. It's just easier. It's one less obstacle. It's something that people feel like that they should do, but it's really easy for them to put off. So they don't want to get organized. I don't want to hear bad news. And so this might, take away some of those obstacles for the advisor-client relationship.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a new frontier in the financial advising profession. We've already seen a couple companies come about that try and make the virtual advisor reality easier and, give them the technology. I forget the name of it, but I was looking into a couple of these different companies because me and a couple friends are actually spitballing ideas for a startup of, how to connect CFPs and how to make virtual advising, a reality. And I was shocked to see that a bunch of people have already kind of started down that path. There's a lot of companies that are starting up now. There's things like Betterment and, others that are just trying to make it easier for the younger generation to get involved with investing. And the next progression, once you get them to open their first investment account, is to, pair them up with their first financial advisor.
Yeah. And I think that, it's going to be something that at some point the regulators are going to have to address, because I don't think the current rules necessarily allow for this scenario to play out long term. So, and I agree that this is definitely here to stay in some form and fashion, and to the better. I think it's to Mike's point. It's easier. It's more productive. There's no driving time. There's none of the nonsense. So if we can get down to brass tacks right away via Zoom or whatever, that's an improvement for the relationship. But the regulations need to kind of be altered to allow for that.
Yeah, we were talking about that a couple days ago. If you're an office manager, but all of your advisors that are working under you are all working from home, do you need a Series 10 to still oversee them? Probably, but
they're still under what's called your OSJ, your Office of Supervisory Jurisdiction, and and that's one of the issues is technically. The advisors aren't really supposed to be printing materials at home. And so unless that is registered as a branch of convenience, so there's all these nuances in the rules that don't really allow for, obviously we have no choice with this, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed to moving forward, because I do think that there's going to be some advisors that just don't ever come back to the office.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be a compliance headache, that's for sure.
Well, how about the idea of documentation? So we're in a Zoom meeting right now, and we're recording. Would something like this serve as adequate documentation of a client meeting if you just record a Zoom meeting?
From a regulatory, it's a good question. I think from a regulatory capacity, I think it would. I don't think that there's any inside counsel on the planet that would say we want every word of that conversation admissible. Right. So because sure. I think that, but most, I know at Janney Montgomery Scott, there's that Dragon software that kind of takes dictation for you and dumps it. But the notes still have to go into the client relationship management software, because that's where all of the tracking for compliance issues goes. That's where the management team kind of reviews what's going on for the client advisor relationship. So I still think that, and just from a storage capacity, these files end up being huge.
Of course.
So firms would have to have server farms to accommodate it.
Yeah, well, I was thinking in some ways it's easier, because I remember all the financial offices I used to work at, we had an entire room full of client files with just rows and rows of, pull-out drawers full of manila folders, and each manila folder is a different client, and those are a nightmare to go through. And I would always think, man, we're working in the past. It would be so nice if this was all digital.
But it's definitely trending that way, right? So most of the things that we do now are paperless, or the paper is scanned in and then shredded. but there are still certain things that need to be original, and so, but there's far less that needs to be original now than there was even like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But it seems like now we're going even so far, because now if you're recording all of your meetings, they're going to be video files. Video files tend to get very large very quickly,
Right.
especially if you're having like a 2-hour long meeting. And if you're doing that multiple times a day, every day, you're exactly right, Brendan. You're talking about now firms are going to have to get their own server farms just to hold their client financial records, which they're probably going to have the same requirements. They have to hold on to them for 7 years,
Yep.
you know, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
I could see growth in the transcript apps.
Yeah.
That recorded meeting has a transcript, and maybe that's what goes into the file. But then I was thinking too about the meetings. At what point where you have firms taking some of these recordings and using them as training tools? Now watch the body language here, or what? Yeah.
I remember we used to do that when I was at Fidelity. Part of our training was all their phone calls are recorded. And we literally just had entire training classes where we sat there with headphones and we listened to recording of client meetings. And it's like, here's how you have a good client meeting, and here's an example of a terrible client meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. And the recordings, if it were video recorded, you've got all kinds of body language and all that stuff. So that could be a compliance issue as well, as far as confidentiality. And it's stay tuned. But it's going to continue to move fast.
Well, and so is the regulations. With Reg BI coming in, I mean, there's more onus to kind of, have that client's best interest at heart, and so I think there may I would love if every conversation I had was recorded, because then there's no, the conversation is what it is. There's no interpretation of it.
Yeah, I am playing around with it just so I'll remember smart things I said. What did I say? What was that I said the other day?
That's quotable. That's going in the quarterly newsletter.
That's gold. That's gold.
Yeah.
Did you get that, fireflies?
Yeah. And now, so have either you, Jerry, or Adam, have you guys had? I'm assuming you work with financial advisors, right? So have you had a virtual meeting with a financial advisor or your financial planner?
I manage my own finances. I know that's not the recommended, doctors aren't supposed to operate on themselves.
Right.
Financial advisors should always get a second set of eyes, but I don't listen to my own advice sometimes. So I manage all my own stuff, but I have done meetings doing, financial plans for individuals. And it has been done virtually, and honestly, it was great. It was super convenient. They felt comfortable. I mean, my demographic is kind of the millennial, since I'm part of the millennial generation myself. And it's what they want. Like, millennials just don't want to come into a stuffy office. They don't want to, I had a client when I had a meeting. It was the Zoom meeting. They asked me if they were supposed to dress up for our meeting, and I'm like, no, don't even worry about it. wear a t-shirt and jeans. You're fine.
But please wear a mask.
Yeah. So I mean, it feels like it's what the younger generation wants out of their financial advice. Like, honestly, if they could, they would probably prefer to just do it entirely over text message, but that's not really realistic.
Yeah, and I wonder if that'll change over time. I wonder if the millennial generation will actually stick, because so I'm 45, but I have my younger brother is 29, and he's very much the epitome of that, where he doesn't want to really talk to anybody face to face, and doesn't even want to talk on the phone, and so, but I can't imagine that 20 years from now that'll be the same, right? I would imagine that will alter as time goes on.
Well, I don't necessarily think so.
Really?
I think it's in the way we came up and the way we grew up. This generation grew up socializing online. We all remember AIM, AOL's Instant Messenger.
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh yeah.
Like, for a lot of us, a lot of the millennial generation, that's where our socializing took place, and that was kind of our first introduction to digital socialization. And I think because we grew up with digital socialization, we're much more comfortable having that, digital interaction. It's almost something that we prefer, because I know I have a few friends who it's like, yeah, I'd like to speak to a financial advisor, but I get, I'm anxious. Like, I don't know what to say. I freeze up. People have different things, but people go to the doctors and they're like, oh, I really want to talk to him about this. And then the doctor says, hey, how's everything going? They're like, yep, everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, that's right up until they hit the doorknob, right? And then they say, oh, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way.
Snap on the glove.
Yeah.
So I think they're a bit more comfortable doing it virtually. I don't know. I mean, you can make whatever comment you want about, the psyche and we're getting soft and all this other stuff. We've all seen the articles about millennials are ruining everything, but I do just think it's a preference, and I don't necessarily think it's something that we'll grow out of.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I guess I would be considered Generation X, and I think we're kind of like a happy medium between the two. We do a lot of things personally and socially, but certainly there's things that we do, without actually being in each other's presence.
Yeah, I have both elements of both at this time, where I do things, I handle some things on my own, but I still have an advisor on some things that I would rather not try to research or choose, particularly like individual securities. I just don't have the interest to do deep research in things, and he's helpful that way. We have not met virtually. We're still on the phone.
Okay.
And he's younger than I am. But we've not had a Zoom meeting or anything of that, but it's, and we've been in contact.
So he's younger than you. Do you know how much younger he is?
Oh, probably 20 years, maybe your age.
Okay, so but that's what you want, right? Because when you enter retirement, what you don't want is to have your advisor retire too, right? Because
I want my advisor, to live longer than I do, for sure.
Well, not necessarily that, but at least work long enough so that you're out of money.
Yeah. I don't want to have too much life left at the end of my money, for sure.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, that happens.
I just wonder, with the millennial generation, so many solutions, this kind of do-it-yourself spirit, to what does that mean? I mean, already you see, the big rise of the robos, right? The robo-advisors and the, invest yourself type of platforms. And I know even on some of these platforms, I was just following a financial planner and someone that researches just the psychology of investing. And he's pointing out that there's all this terrible financial advice that's happening on TikTok. So I just wonder,
oh my God,
what's going on, and what will their expectation be? What's going to be the solution? I mean, are we going to have to adapt as advisors and compete with that?
Yeah, autocorrect.
Yeah, right.
Well,
autocorrect advising.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I saw was on Reddit. Wall Street Bets is the most popular investment thread. It's like one of the most popular investment websites is Wall Street Bets on Reddit, and the entire thread is dedicated to making fun of the market and giving troll advice and giving fake advice. And it's gotten to the point where they have so many followers, they're actually causing swings in the market. And different hedge funds are setting up algorithms that skim the posts in Wall Street Bets, and it's causing these like massive swings. Like with Hertz declared bankruptcy. Wall Street Bets turned it into a meme, and Hertz went up in price after declaring bankruptcy because all of these, individual investors were quote unquote memeing and buying the stock.
It went up hundreds of percent.
Yeah, hundreds of percent. Like, and it just absolutely absurd.
To the point where they tried to do a secondary offering of their stock from bankruptcy court. I mean, seriously, like that's not The Onion. That's like for real.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is millennial culture. It's like it's this. it's almost like the world is so messed up and all we see is these things going wrong. So millennials just have this like attitude of, well, nothing matters, so let's at least have a good time while we're here. And they make some really irrational moves that have real life consequences.
Oh yeah.
Just to further that thought, that's just another sign that the apocalypse is upon us, is that the judge allowed it.
Oh
yeah,
my
they petitioned to do like $100 million worth of stock in a secondary offering, and they didn't end up doing it, but it was allowed. I think the SEC actually squashed it. But it's nuts. It literally is nuts. So I'm sorry, Adam. I cut you off.
Oh yeah, the TikTok post that I saw as an example of some of the poor advice. It was about retirement planning and pros and cons on either side of a whiteboard. And this younger advisor, I believe, or a salesperson, trying to sell the idea that for retirement purposes, the Roth IRA is just nowhere near as good as having universal life insurance with cash value, and that's going to really get you what you need when you hit retirement. And that stuff, I mean, it got a ton of views, and I mean, luckily the financial planner police came in and were like, this is just bunk. This is garbage.
Right.
And but people are seeing this, and people are treating that as advice, and people are making money off of that advice. I know it's been going on for a while, but
you could almost draw the comparison of that CNBC and some of the personalities on CNBC predicated all of this, right? Because it's the same thing. They're giving advice kind of in a vacuum, and there's the day-to-day it changes. There's no benchmark to measure the success or failure of that advice over time. And there's just so much assumed authority on the information because they're on TV.
It's Kramer culture. You know, Kramer was on TV and he kind of set the mold for it, and now people are taking it to TikTok and Reddit, and also same with the same vein of like Twitter. Twitter advice is also another source of just like completely unvetted, sometimes terrible advice, but you get, they look back in hindsight's 2020, they make 30 recommendations, one of them pays off, and then they, recycle that. It's like, hey, look how right we were on this. This means all our next ones are going to be right too.
Yeah.
So it's just confirmation bias at that point. But yeah, it's entertainment more than actual advice is what it comes down to.
And it's across all platforms. It's not really just the social media. I mean, each of us reads a lot. And you pull up these articles or Google some topic, maybe you got to ask a question. So you start reading all these articles. It's amazing how often you find in there's like, well, that's just wrong. It doesn't work that way. That's not how that tax piece works or whatever it is. It's just everywhere. Oh. And there's no vetting. You think there would be vetting on the articles and some senior editor that actually knows the stuff. But sometimes it's like, that is so wrong.
I have students send me articles like saying, hey, your textbook is wrong. I found this blog that was published in 2015 that says the opposite. I'm like, okay, but I'm going to tell you the textbook is right. And this like self-published blog on MySpace is wrong.
Yeah. But layer that in. We're talking about working from home. We're talking about clients at home with access to all of this.
And more time in their hands than they probably ever had before.
That's right. That's right. Many of them
and more money because of the stimulus checks. Right? So there's like this perfect storm of these things coming together where you got people who maybe never had money to invest before or who would be betting on sports who are now, they don't have the sports to bet on. They're having some money come in. Right? And boom, now I can gamble on the stock market, and here's how I do it. I found this TikTok.
I was reading that it's at the highest percentage, both as percentage of the population and also percentage of just money on the market. More of it is in the hands of individual investors than ever before, rather than the traditional, like hedge funds and mutual fund managers. Now it's the higher percentage. It's still not the majority, but it's still it's the highest percentage it's ever been in human history, and it's only going up of money in hands of individual investors.
Wow.
Making these decisions that are maybe not necessarily the best decisions.
Also known historically as the weak hands. Right?
Yeah.
So the weak hands in the market.
Yep. But going back to Mike's point, layering it in, I think it's true, Mike. I think we're seeing now what doctors had during the birth of the internet when WebMD came out. And all these doctors were reporting like a huge spike in hypochondriacs and, self-diagnosis based off of reading symptoms online. And they come in, the doctor's freaking out. And the doctor's like, no, you stubbed your toe. You're fine. Yeah. Now I feel we're having this in the financial industry, which doctors went through in the early 2000s with the birth of the internet.
That is such a good point.
Yeah, I had a doctor tell me that the WebMD was the best thing that ever happened to his career. He's like,
oh, yeah.
You get a headache and you come see me for some deadly disease that you found that, a symptom of a headache. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I look up literally any symptom and apparently I have cancer.
Yeah. I recently had a doctor tell me, you're probably better off just laying off the WebMD for now. Just let us do the work. That's what you're paying us for.
Because even if the information on WebMD is 100% accurate and medically sound, I don't have the brain or the training to interpret it correctly, so it's going to lead me down these paths and then of course you're going to start letting your behavioral come in, because I'm going to go find the things that are killing me as opposed to like starting to discount the things that are killing me. And so, it creates this like psychological factor as well. Yeah.
But therein lies the opportunity for the advisor, I think, just like the doctor who said WebMD was the best thing that ever happened to my practice. I think there's opportunity for top shelf financial advisors because of all of this noise and all of this bad information, misinformation. You get a client and you prove yourself that you're top shelf and you work under a fiduciary capacity, let's say. And I don't think they're leaving. I don't think they're leaving when you can show them how wrong so much of this stuff is. I think you've got them like as a life client at that point.
I agree. And I actually think it could be a tool, a behavioral tool. So let's take eMoney, for example, right? You could take all these accounts, you can aggregate them to one place. Clients now have instant access, if you upload an app on your phone, to see performance of their accounts and the underlying investments kind of day to day. You can, with a quarterly performance statement, you could say, hey, let's take the static out day to day. You don't have to... We're on the right course, and here's where we're headed, or here's where we need to make corrections. But I'd see that when I was a junior advisor all the time, that some clients were logging in 8 times a day, and were in touch way more frequently because they had that instant access to here's how my accounts are performing all together right now, and something moves in the market, and there's the phone call or there's the email. But there is the opportunity, I think, to work with clients and to just tell them, here's our philosophy, and here's how we're gonna validate that, and this is how we're gonna do this thoughtfully, and under the care of someone that really knows this stuff, not your interpretation of WebMD.
The issue that we have that I've had in my practice, and I can't imagine that it's unique to me, is that the tendency for clients is that they'll always use as their reference point the highest level that they ever saw their investments were, right? So it's not like, well, we started the year at this and we're up 10%. It's that we were up 20%. It's also like
intraday.
Yeah.
It's like intraday. It was.
And that's definitely that's a challenging conversation, because it's just listen, the plan says we need to go from point A to point Z. You're worried about point W to point X in or whatever the letter comes after W. That's not. I am an academic.
You got it.
Yeah. But so
when life gives you melons, you might have dyslexia.
Yeah. So it creates this phenomenon where they almost have access to too much information.
Yeah,
True.
I agree totally.
I was reading this study that showed traders who had access to live updating quotes compared to traders who had quotes that updated every 10 minutes were far more likely to trade and trade more often and more frequently when they had live quotes compared to delayed quotes, because you get this fear of missing out where, oh, it's up a penny, it's down a penny. Oh, it's down 10 cents. Now's the time to buy. And if you think about it, at the turn of the century, we are getting quotes on stocks, once a day in the newspaper, or maybe even once a week if the Sunday Times, and you would see the stock quotes. And now we just have this instantaneous, response from the market. It's really changing the psychology of how we trade.
Yeah, that's definitely, you get, and so there's a great book that I talk to my students, both undergraduate students and the people in our CFP program, the Psychology of Investing by John Knopfsinger, and there's a number of examples of how that access to information leads to overconfidence, which leads to behavior where you feel like you have to do more, and you feel like you're right about every step that you're taking, and it leads to typically bad outcomes.
All right, guys. We decided to move question of the episode to the end of the episode since it flows a little bit better. You guys ready to kind of sink our teeth into our conundrum today?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right, we got a good one because after all, guys, it's back to school time, and with back to school for our college students, that means tuition bills are come due. So we got a nice how do you pay for college type question. How do you guys feel about coordination rules?
They're a little scary, aren't they?
Just a little bit. And I really like this question because this is something that's really important, not only for people sitting for the CFP exam, but this is a really good thing for all CFPs who are currently practicing to keep in mind too, because I feel this is something that a lot of people overlook. And for the people that overlook it in the wrong way, it can really screw up a client's day. So you want to make sure you get this right.
And education planning is one of the biggest things I think most people do in their practice. It's something that you touch on with almost every single client, whether it's for their kids or their grandkids, or college planning is something you touch every day.
Right up there with retirement planning. I agree.
Yep.
Both of those are pretty universal at this point.
Yep. So this is something great for our students sitting for the exam. And also, if you already have your marks, this is a good thing to keep in mind. So a couple with an MAGI of $90,000 wants to know which combination of techniques can be used to pay annual education costs for their daughter in her first year of college. Option A, the American Opportunity Credit, a $20,000 tuition gift from the grandparents, and a Pell Grant. Option B, a Coverdell distribution, a $20,000 tuition gift from the grandparent, and an American Opportunity Credit. Option C, a lifetime learning credit, a Coverdell distribution, and a UTMA distribution. Or option D, American Opportunity Credit, $20,000 gift from the grandparent, and a UTMA account distribution. So lots going on in this question, guys. Let's kind of break it down first. I feel these are kind of two categories. One is tax credits and one is college funding accounts. So we got the AOC and the lifetime learning credit. And the Pell Grant, I guess, will kind of fall under that, but it's not really a tax credit. Let's just talk about those three just off the bat.
Sure.
Yeah, let's hear from our parents first. Yeah, Adam and Brendan, go.
I'll go for it.
My kids are going to school on scholarship, so I don't have to worry about any of this.
Yeah.
You say that now in sixth grade.
I keep telling myself
saw that on TikTok. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The best way to retire is to win the lottery. Yeah. This has been your TikTok advice.
Well, what I would say is, and I don't think it's going to be the case with this scenario, but when we're looking at the credits from the credit side, the American Opportunity Credit and Lifetime Learning, they get quite nuanced just as standalone tax credits. And one thing that's going to help me to possibly narrow down choices is knowing that when we're talking about one person, so in this case, they're talking about their daughter, one daughter, that you're going to either go with one or the other if it's available. So you can either go American Opportunity Credit or you can go with the Lifetime Learning Credit. American Opportunity Credit, has some parameters. It's going to be only for 4 years of undergrad. Here we can verify that she's in her first year of college, so that seems okay. They both have AGI phase outs. They're meant to help people, lower middle income, with a little bit of a tax credit for sending their kid off to college or kids off to college. Same thing with the LLC. That's going to be one, you can qualify with using that once per return, but you can't use both for the same child. So just looking through the options here, I don't see any where we're trying to use both for that daughter. And I know that doesn't help us to narrow down choices here, but it's an important point just when you're starting to look at the scenario. Keep an eye on the AGI, see who's involved. Are we talking 2 children? Are we talking 1 child? And start to narrow down those choices.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an important distinction, Adam. So you can't double up on the AOC and the LLC, the American Opportunity Credit and the Lifetime Learning Credit. And like you said, AOC is for each child. So if the clients have multiple children going to college at the same time, the AOC tends to be better, whereas the LLC, Lifetime Learning Credit, is for the family as a whole. So that tends to favor single family households.
Correct. And we're even talking about different credit amounts. American Opportunity Credit can go up to $2,500 in a given year when maxed out. And a portion of that's going to be refundable. So if you zero out your tax return, you can actually get a refund back if it's set up right and you execute that strategy correctly. With the LLC, you can get up to $2,000.
LLC, 20%, isn't it?
Yeah,
20% of 10.
20% of 10. And that's an important point, too, of how many dollars of qualified education expenses does it take to max out? And this is where AOTC wins again. It only takes $4,000 of expenses to max out AOTC at $2,500, whereas to take advantage of LLC, you need $10,000 in eligible expenses to get a $2,000 tax credit. So I just think by default, that's the first place you check is, could we do American Opportunity Credit here?
And it's your choice. So on the tax return, it's your choice. If you choose the wrong one, no one's going to correct it, right? So you could cost yourself $500 right off the bat.
Yep. So it's definitely case by case. There's, rules of thumb with those 2 credits, but it does depend on, how much of a tuition bill is come due, whether you have 1 kid or multiple kids, lots of factors. You really have to take it on a client by client basis. But for our students sitting for the exam, your rule of thumb is you can't double up on them. If any answer has both, you can just cross it off the list. It's not allowed.
Right.
Well, and I think to extend that planner application and being a better financial advisor, to understand the other sources as well, because sometimes the real life situation is, in what order should we liquidate some things?
Yep.
In what order should we use 1, 2, 3, 4? What should we do first? So we have to be knowledgeable about the tax treatment, any penalties that might apply here or there, whether we would be looking at ordinary income tax to pull money out, or do we have something that's long-term capital gain? It really is a holistic perspective, and then these specific education things can play a role as well.
And on top of that, Mike, some of the assets are more punitive on the FAFSA form, right? So it makes sense to be sure that you're liquidating intelligently, so that you don't hinder yourself in years 2 through 4 in the college.
Yeah, Adam's the king of FAFSA. I mean, he knows that stuff, and that's absolutely correct what you're saying. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, without a doubt. It's not only the assets that are held either by the parent or by the child that have different weighting in figuring out what that expected family contribution is going to be for college, which just directly impacts financial aid. But on the distribution side, you might think it's great that grandma and grandpa have the 529 and those assets aren't going to be counted on the FAFSA form. And that's true. They're included at a rate of 0%. But if grandma and grandpa are really eager to pay for the first 2 years of school, that's going to impact years 3 and 4 in terms of financial aid eligibility. So that's a whole nother layer. I think it'd make for a really good scenario of the month, question of the month sometime, is to look at that and see how that's applied.
A whole episode would be great on this stuff.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that kind of brings up the next option on this list here. They're not as popular anymore ever since 529s were introduced, but there are still quite a few of them hanging around that financial advisors run into, and that's Coverdell accounts. What's kind of the ruling with them and how they interact with the credits?
Well, same thing, no double dipping.
Right.
You just have to have enough expenses to spread across the various things, but you have to avoid the double dip.
Yep, exactly. So if you use the 529 or if you use the Coverdell, because they're tax advantaged accounts, if you use them to pay for college expenses, you cannot then claim the American Opportunity Credit or the Lifetime Learning Credit on those same expenses. It's considered double dipping. It's not allowed. You're going to get hammered on your tax return if you try and do that. So that's another thing. When we talk about coordination rules, that's what we're talking about. It's coordinating the way we pay for college so that we don't accidentally double dip.
Right.
So if you get a question on the test, or if you're just giving general advice to a client and you don't have dollar amounts, you can't use any of the credits and the Coverdell or 529 at the same time, unless you know for a fact that they have enough college expenses that it's enough to both cover it with the distribution and also have some left over that they're paying out of pocket that they can use to claim the credit.
Yeah,
for.
the one thing that I think kept Coverdell around for a lot, I mean, for one, you just can't put, what is it, $2,000
$2,000
total?
max, yeah.
So it's like, but it did have one thing that now even has been diminished, and that was the fact that Coverdell could be used for K through 12.
Right. And that's historically what it was used for.
Yeah, and now, at least at this point in time, you can pull money out of a 529. What is it, like $10,000 a year or something like that?
10,000, but for tuition only. So that's
for tuition only.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the fold, and I think that brings up the real planning application for Coverdell, right? Is that if you can use $10,000 for tuition only for K through 12 with your 529. That's all well and good. But what about the other expenses, if there are other expenses? What about room or board? What about books and supplies? The Coverdell could step in, and it serves a purpose there if there's a Coverdell out there where you can have an investment vehicle that you can use for those non-tuition related expenses. You could also, if tuition's above and beyond that 10K mark, you could use the Coverdell to above and beyond the $10,000 limit. Yep. So there's still some viable planning application for those.
So that kind of brings us to the next one here. Cash is king. This next one's pretty easy, but there is a little trick with it, and I'm wondering if you guys can pick up the trick I'm thinking of. $20,000 tuition gift from the grandparents. Now, it doesn't have any coordination rules with that because it's just cash. But what's the pitfall that you need to look out for when it comes to cash gifts from grandma and grandpa?
Well, you don't have to spend them on school, do you?
Exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
Not what I was going for. I was more thinking of the dollar value in that. If I'll give you guys a hint. This tuition gift is more than $15,000. So what's the trick there?
There's a little tax
so that
impact
would be above the annual exclusion, right?
Yep. So it's going to be gift tax unless there's two exceptions here I can think of. I want to see if you guys can pick it up.
Well, if the grandparent has another spouse if another grandparent is the spouse, then they can double those gifts.
Yep, that was exception one I was thinking of. If they make it a gift, they can give up to $30,000, $15,000 from
gift,
each.
Yep. Or they can pay.
What's the other way?
Pay direct.
Direct payment.
Yeah.
Brendan looks shocked. He's like, I said it first.
Sorry,
I
Brendan.
forgot that I'm on camera still.
Yeah.
Brendan's just flipping Mike off here. So yeah, those were the two exceptions I was thinking of. With cash gifts,
See, now,
it's great.
I didn't pick up. This is why I always say read the question, read the answer, because I read this as $20,000 tuition gift from grandparents.
Yeah,
so
but it actually says
a grandparent.
Grandparent.
Wow.
From a grandparent, so it's a single grandparent. So in order for them not to pay gift tax on it, they have to pay it directly to the school.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm the only grandparent here, so I had honors on this one.
Yes,
Brendan.
you did. Yeah.
You're out of order.
Yeah.
Now, going back, Adam, I want you to give us a little bit more color on this. How does UTMA accounts affect the FAFSA, and how it affects paying for college?
So it's a custodial account. So the account is going to be overseen by the parent or the custodian, but it's for the student. It's for the benefit of the student, or the child.
And
so when we look at it,
they own it.
They own it, yeah. So when we look at it from FAFSA perspective, that's considered an asset of the child. And if you have a whole lot in the UTMA account, and you're hoping to qualify for financial aid, those rates of inclusion for student income and assets are pretty high, 20 and 50%. So if you have an UTMA account that's an asset of the student, that is going to be accounted for on the FAFSA, and if it's too high, it could really increase the expected family contribution, which is, said in a different way, is to decrease the available pool of financial aid.
So generally, what I'm picking up is we generally want to spend the UTMA as soon as possible, so that at least in the later years of college, it doesn't get counted against them for future years. You
could, yeah. Another thing to keep an eye out for there is kiddie tax, because any of the unearned income that's generated from that, if that goes above some certain thresholds, then we're looking at that kiddie tax problem. So, Brendan, in your experience, how are these being used planning wise these days?
So the UTMA is for certainly for people that typically when I'm seeing UTMAs, it's not people that are going to qualify in any shape or form for financial aid anyway. And so the UTMA accounts, I think, are intended to give the child, some leg up in either buying a house or starting an investment account. But, people will typically steer towards the 529 funds for for the college funding purposes.
Yeah, I feel that too. UTMAs tend to be a wealthy family account. People who are qualifying for the AOC and the LLC probably aren't having a UTMA. Right. And when they do get set up instead of a 529, it's usually in that we don't necessarily think our kid's going to be college material. Right. So we want to help them out in other ways, because the UTMA has the benefit of not being forced to be used for college.
Sure. And it affords the ability to hold almost any asset. It's not as
that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Like real estate.
I ran into a question on that on the exam where it was between a 529 and an UTMA, and everyone always chooses the 529 for this question because it's kind of like inbred in us at this point to just always go for the 529. But the question said the father was a diehard investor who really wanted full control over the assets and wanted to be able to choose his securities. And for that reason, you would want to go with an UTMA, because with a 529, you can only do the very restricted mutual funds. Right. That not only just mutual funds, but specifically the mutual funds that 529 offers.
Right.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Well, just to wrap it up here for our answer for those, I know we threw a lot of information there, so it was kind of hard to follow along, but the correct answer was the American Opportunity Credit, a $20,000 tuition gift from a grandparent, and the UTMA account. That is the correct answer because A, it doesn't double up on the credits. It's just the American Opportunity Credit, not the LLC. The $20,000 tuition gift from the grandparent is just independent. And then also the UTMA account is independent, which is why it allows us to use all three of those in this scenario.
Good deal. All right.
Awesome stuff, guys. I think that was a great time. We talked about a lot. I hope our listeners enjoyed it. I know I did. And I'll see you guys all next month.
Yeah, we'll see you next month. Stay safe.
All right, guys. Thanks.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.